Episode 6 of the Stories of Kcymaerxthaere, The Way to the Moon. A while back, a friend of Kcymaerxthaere asked me if I'd be interested in installing a Kcymaerxthaere site in Davao City, which is actually one of the biggest cities in the world physically. It's on the island of Mindanao, on the southern part in the Philippines. And I was like, heck yeah. Why? Because it was well known as a place where some of the more important Nyelvate words were brought to try to solve the puzzle on the moon. And so that was pretty exciting. Plus, like a lot of places in the Philippines, it has the jeepneys, which are awesome and really should be a UNESCO World Heritage Site on their own, just all the fleets of them. So it was exciting to do the installation there. It was right on a place where a couple of overlaps happened. For one thing, a woman named Mlates Dunhuira, who has her own whole story, actually observed one of the Yaarayehyay picking up a stone. Now, it was probably for the nesting material, not particularly for the moon, but it was still a pretty cool connection. And what we installed there was a specific Nyelvate word, which means the luminous texture of textures that can only be found on the surface of the moon. It's a beautiful word. Actually, I can show it to you right now. There you go. And the word actually appears in multiple sizes and ways on the site, with two in fairly large scale, one telling the story in English and one telling the story in Tagalog. But there are also some maps, including, most importantly, a map of the puzzle on the moon, seen here in the concrete. This was the puzzle that the Yaarayehyay were trying to solve. That's why they were bringing these words, and each time they brought a word, they had to try it out and see if it fit, because they didn't necessarily know the story it was going to tell that would fit in that space. And they had to be extremely careful, because it was basically like having a puzzle where all you had was the border and you didn't even know what jigsaw pieces they were. The piece that was lifted here may not even be the one that fit in the slot that goes there. Of course, they had to invent the slot, but it seems like the purpose of it was to take a very long time. And then on top of that, there was the melancholy part, which is that once the puzzle was solved, those who solved it, the Yaarayehyay and the xthadransg who were helping them below the surface, the melancholy part was that once it was solved, there was one less, infinity in the world or in the universe. And so that was kind of it meant that they were not always in a hurry. And so it took many, many generations, a generation of generations. And the puzzle was hard. The great birds in their xthadransg cohort faced a blank page with no hint of the story to go on, and no obvious intrinsic meaning to the forms, just like the sounds we use in conversation. But in the case of, the Nyelvate, because they are shape words, you sort of want to say to yourself, well, certainly they look like something. But if you think about it, there's some words that have that quality onomatopoeia, which means that the word sounds like its meaning. And, there's the buzzing of the bees and meow and barking of the dogs and all these things. But most words aren't that way. I mean, if you think about it in English, the word green isn't green. The word big is not really that big, and the word minuscule is not small at all. The word pedantic, well, actually, the word pedantic does sound pretty pedantic. You really sound like a pedant every time you use the word pedantic. But that's probably an accumulated meaning if you think about it. So with this word, with shape words, it isn't representation, but sometimes seems to be random patterns, like the precise results of erased equations. Take the linear lunar wreckage. There's actually a debris of all the spacecraft that have been to the moon or tried to get to the moon and that have crashed there or been left there or whatever. And sometimes when you look at those objects as they appear on the moon, you start to see patterns, and some of those patterns make Nyelvate shape words, and this is one of them. And it's fitting because it has that meaning I mentioned. So, for example, part of Apollo 17 is here, and part of Luna 24, which is part of the Soviet space program, it's here. Luna 16, the Apollo 14 booster, Ranger 8, and this, and then Apollo 15. So they actually make this pattern. So then a logical question, of course, is, okay, you get that all those points amount to the, the places where the space debris is, the space heritage. All those spots on the moon make this. But what about this? This is kind of, irregular and it's not a straight line. Well, that's a path in ferylemt. That it's like one of those trails I was talking about through space or time. And so it doesn't seem like a straight line to us, but it would have been if you were traveling in that way. So these shapes, what do they mean in the end? Where does the meaning come from? I think they cast meaning the same way that a prism casts the color of the rainbow from what seems like normal white light to us. It was there all along, but we needed the right way to see it. And I think many of the Nyelvate words have that quality, even for those of us who are not terribly fluent in the language. And what you'll see is what happens when all those words come together. Because in the crater called Theophilus on the moon is where the puzzle was. And the puzzle told a story. It was the story of Delfmenti. And Delfmenti was an xthaedransg who was not like the rest of them. And for everyone in that situation, it had its pluses and it had its minuses. But that's the story that was told by all these shapes collected from all these different places over so much time. And in a sense, we never really know if the puzzle has been completed, or we don't. See you next time. Shof, Keppel, Poets.